Milky Way opening hook. For months, astronomers around the world had been tracking a silent traveler moving through our solar system. Not a comet. Not an asteroid. Something different. It arrived without warning, emerging from the darkness between the stars, an interstellar object, later designated 3I Atlas. Unlike earlier visitors such as Oumuamua and 2I, Borisov, this one didn't behave the way scientists expected. At first, it seemed ordinary. Until it wasn't. Telescope. The first anomaly 7. As 3I Atlas approached the Sun, observatories began recording subtle irregularities. Data from ground-based telescopes, and later confirmed by the Hubble Space Telescope, showed something unusual, a faint jet of material extending toward the Sun. At first, scientists suspected a known phenomenon called an anti-tail, a visual effect caused by dust alignment and perspective. But the numbers didn't match. The direction, the density, the persistence, none of it behaved like a typical comet. Brain scientific confusion. The deeper researchers looked, the stranger it became. Its trajectory suggested less mass than expected. Its rotation was unusually stable. Its brightness fluctuated in a controlled pattern. Even data from the James Webb Space Telescope added to the mystery. Spectroscopy revealed something unexpected. The surface composition appeared too uniform. Not impossible, but highly unusual. Some scientists proposed rare materials. Others suggested unknown interstellar chemistry. And then, a small group proposed something far more controversial. Man scientist. The controversial idea among them was Avi Loeb. Known for his bold interpretations of cosmic anomalies, Loeb suggested that objects like this should not be dismissed too quickly. Not as alien spacecraft, but as potential technological signatures. Most of the scientific community disagreed. But the idea was now on the table. New moon disappearance behind the Sun. As 3I Atlas moved into solar conjunction, it vanished from view. Hidden behind the Sun's glare, it became completely unobservable for weeks. No data. No updates. Just silence. Astronomers waited. Because whatever it wasn't finished yet. Sun. The return. When the object finally reappeared, everything changed. It wasn't dimmer. It was brighter. Far brighter than models predicted. Its reflectivity had increased dramatically, far beyond what its size should allow. Even more puzzling, its temperature remained stable. As if something was regulating it. Satellite dish. The signal 7. Then came the moment that changed everything. A faint, repeating pulse. Detected in ultraviolet frequencies. At first, it looked like noise. But when analysts processed the data, a pattern began to emerge. Not perfectly ordered. Not completely random. Something in between. A sequence, repeating at fixed intervals. Carefully structured, but not obviously artificial. And that ambiguity made it even more unsettling. Satellite. The deeper analysis teams across multiple observatories began studying the signal. Some argued it was a natural resonance effect. Others weren't so sure. Because the pattern showed signs of adaptation. It changed slightly depending on how it was observed. Almost as if it was reacting. Puzzle piece. The bigger question at this point. The debate split into two camps. 1. Conservative view. Unknown natural phenomenon. Rare but explainable physics. 2. Speculative view. Non-natural origin. Possible technological signature. No one had proof. Only questions. Rocket. The final event. Then, without warning, the signal stopped. For hours, 3I Atlas went completely silent. And then, it changed course. Not dramatically. But measurably. Enough to raise a question no one wanted to answer. Was it just physics? Or was it control? Milky Way. The departure as it moved toward the outer solar system, the object emitted one final burst of radiation. Short. Structured. Unresolved. Then it was gone. Disappearing beyond the edge of the sun's influence, back into interstellar space. Brain-closing thought: we still don't know what 3I Atlas was. A rare cosmic anomaly? A new class of interstellar object? Or something we're not yet ready to understand? But one thing is certain. For the first time in decades, the question isn't just what is out there. The signal should have faded. That's what the models predicted. That's what every previous interstellar object had done. But 3I Atlas didn't follow the models. It followed something else. Days after its final transmission, observatories expected silence. Instead, they found something still there. Not the object. The signal. Satellite dish: the Echo 7 researchers analyzing archived data noticed faint fluctuations buried inside cosmic background noise. At first, it looked insignificant. Background interference. Instrument drift. Static. But one detail stood out. The frequency ratio matched the final pulse of 3I Atlas. Not exactly, but closely enough to raise concern. The signal wasn't gone. It had spread. Microscope-independent confirmations within days. Multiple institutions confirmed similar anomalies. Subtle distortions in solar wind measurements, unusual harmonics in radio telescope arrays, weak but repeating fluctuations across different wavelengths. Even datasets from older missions began showing traces, hidden in plain sight, including archived readings linked to the Hubble Space Telescope. Whatever had happened, it wasn't localized. Brain: a dangerous possibility. Some scientists proposed a radical idea. What if the signal wasn't just transmitted, but imprinted? Instead of sending data outward, 3I Atlas may have interacted with the medium itself, leaving behind a kind of resonant pattern in space. A temporary structure in electromagnetic noise. Not permanent, but persistent. Mad scientist: the Loeb hypothesis evolves. Avi Loeb returned to the debate, this time more cautiously. Instead of calling it a message, he described it as a system that responds to observation, not broadcasting blindly, but reacting. That distinction changed everything. Puzzle piece: pattern recognition 6. When scientists visualized the residual signal, something unexpected appeared. Not words, not symbols, but structure. A repeating geometric pattern, layered, recursive, almost fractal. Each time the data was processed, the structure shifted slightly, maintaining its form, but never identical. Warning: the observation effect. Then came the most unsettling discovery. The pattern behaved differently depending on how it was analyzed. Different algorithms produced slightly different outputs. Different instruments recorded slightly altered variations. At first, this was blamed on noise. But the deviations weren't random. They were responsive. Global reaction. At this point, the scientific community split again. Conservative interpretation, data contamination, instrumental bias, pattern recognition error, alternative view, adaptive signal behavior, feedback, interaction with observers. No one could prove either. But no one could ignore it anymore. Revolving light: the containment debate. Some researchers suggested limiting further analysis. Not out of fear, but caution. Because if the signal truly responded to observation, then studying it might be changing it. Or worse, strengthening it. Satellite: the silent expansion. Meanwhile, the anomaly continued spreading, slowly fading, but not disappearing. Across radio frequencies, solar wind data, deep space background measurements, it was becoming harder to isolate. Not because it was growing, but because it was blending in. Milky Way. The bigger question at this stage, one idea began circulating quietly. What if 3I Atlas didn't just pass through our solar system, what if it left something behind? Not a probe. Not a device. But a pattern. A system. A kind of footprint. Brain-closing reflection. We've always assumed that if something intelligent reached us, it would arrive physically. A ship. A signal. A clear message. But what if intelligence doesn't travel that way? What if it moves through structure, through patterns, through systems we barely understand? Movie camera outro. 3I Atlas is gone. But its presence may not be. And the deeper we look into the signal it left behind, the more one question begins to take shape. Are we studying it, or is it studying us?